Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's clinical trial webinar. We're thrilled to have you joining us today to learn more about Harmony Biosciences' Phase 2 study of Pitolisant for the treatment of excessive daytime sleepiness in PWS. An overview of this study, along with additional PWS clinical trial opportunities, is available on our website at fpwr.org, and I do encourage you to visit this site to learn more about the opportunities that are available. Before we jump into today's presentation, I would like to mention a survey that is currently being conducted by Trend to better understand the role of sleep in rare disease. The survey only takes about 15 to 30 minutes to complete and will be used to help us better understand how people diagnosed with rare diseases experience sleep and sleep-related issues. If you're interested in participating in this survey, and I hope you are, I'll place the link into the chat box of your GoToMeeting control panel in just a minute so that you can click on the link or copy and paste it for later if you would like to learn more. Today's guest presenters are joining us from Harmony Biosciences and will be sharing information with you regarding their study of Pitolisant. We will be collecting questions from the audience throughout the webinar, and we'll answer all of your questions after their short presentation. So if you do have questions, we do want to hear from you. Please submit your questions through the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. Without any further delay, I would like to give you Dr. Ravena, who's going to tell you more about this study of Pitolisant. Dr. Ravena, it's all you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you on this Monday afternoon. First and foremost, I want to thank you to the Foundation of Prader Willi Research for your time and for all the efforts towards helping these kids with Prader Willi syndrome. And we're hoping that this study will push forward and be something fruitful for our patients. And so the title of our presentation this morning, or this afternoon, excuse me, is a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled phase 2 study to evaluate the safety and efficacy of Pitolisant in patients with Prader Willi syndrome, followed by an open label extension. And so first and foremost, we have to talk about what the actual medication will do. So Pitolisant is the name of the medication. This increases histamine in the brain. We have these receptors or these toll-like operators in our brain that respond in keeping you awake. And so the commercial name of Pitolisant is Wakix. It was approved by the FDA in August of 2019 to treat excessive daytime sleepiness in adults with narcolepsy. And in October 2020, it has been approved in adults only that can also treat cataplexy with narcolepsy features as well. And so our study is a phase 2 study, which basically means that we are looking at the safety and effectiveness of Pitolisant. And so we want to be able to compare the medication to the placebo in patients with Prader Willi syndrome that experience excessive daytime sleepiness. And so the two main endpoints of the study is exactly that. How safe is Pitolisant and how well is it tolerated in patients with Prader Willi syndrome? We want to know the effectiveness of Pitolisant in treating excessive daytime sleepiness. So sometimes when you're doing these studies, though, there are secondary endpoints, things that we may or may not expect to find a signal or data supporting a specific symptom or sign of that condition. And so other things that we will be looking for, even though there may not be enough evidence, but we're hoping that maybe we'll find something there, is also in the areas of behavior, learning, attention, the impact on the caregiver of a person with Prader Willi syndrome, how it affects sleep time, how it affects hunger, and other symptoms. And so again, it's mainly these are just secondary endpoints, meaning if there's a signal, that's great, and that could open up doors for another study that could really focus on that point, versus our major endpoints of the study is basically safety as well as the effectiveness on excessive daytime sleepiness. And so this is a double-blind study, so that means nobody will know what treatment or dose of the medication is received, and you will also not know who gets placebo versus the actual drug. And after the 11-week period of whether you're taking the placebo or the drug, you might be eligible for an open label extension, which is basically all participants, whether you had the placebo or not, will receive the medication. We hope to get about 60 patients enrolled in the study from 10 different study clinics throughout the US. So enrollment is competitive, but we're looking for the first 60 eligible patients, regardless of age, which the age range is from 6 to 65. I want to refer you to the clinicaltrials.gov as a reference, as things can change as far as the sites, and then there's also more details as far as the key eligibility criteria. But we did list the highlighted portions of the eligibility criteria, but there's obviously more that you can go to that website. We are enrolling males and females ages 6 to 65 with a confirmed diagnosis of Prader Willi syndrome as confirmed by a genetic test. They must have excessive daytime sleepiness as defined by a multiple sleep latency test, which I'll explain a little bit further in the next few slides. And this is actually a part of the sleep study over a course of a day and a half. And so there will be one study at baseline or day 1, and then again at the end of week 11. There must be a washout period of any sleep or wake promoting agents that you could be taking that could affect excessive daytime sleepiness for at least 3 days prior to wearing an actigraph, which again, I will explain to you in the next slide. However, these medications are allowed in the open label extension. Another highlight that I want to emphasize is that the caregiver must be consistent. We want to have the same person that is attending the patient at the beginning of the trial, throughout the trial, and at the end of the trial. And it's mainly to ensure that we're getting accurate information that's consistent from the caregiver throughout the entire parts of the study. And so you guys will be the key as far as what symptoms, what side effects, what changes you've noticed in your patient's behavior, which will be very helpful for us. Patients cannot have a primary psychiatric diagnosis with current active symptoms of psychosis or schizophrenia. And this is really referring to very significant psychiatric disease. We acknowledge the fact that Prader Willi syndrome do have some behavioral issues as well as some psychiatric diagnoses, but we're looking for severe, significant psychiatric abnormalities there. And then patients who must not have untreated obstructive sleep apnea. So if you were diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea, as long as you're being adequately treated with whether it's CPAP, BiPAP, or medical management, they must have that adequately controlled before they can be considered for enrollment. So the dosing is based on low dose, high dose, and placebo. So therefore, there are 3 groups that will be involved. Again, it's random, so no one is going to be, it's going to be randomized and blind, so no one's really going to know which group you're in until we're doing the analysis. In order to ensure that there's no assigned bias to it, the study kits that are given to each clinic site will have both pitolisant and the placebo tablets. And then after the 11-week period, there is an opportunity to participate in the open label extension study, in which all participants, regardless of whether you had the placebo or not, will get the actual medication or drug from the study. The study groups are also based on ages. So ages 6 to 11, there's going to be a low dose, a high dose, and a matching placebo. 12 to 17, again, same thing, low dose, high dose, and matching placebo. And then 18 to 65 years, low dose, high dose, and matching placebo. So I mentioned earlier that there are 2 parts to the study. The first part is the double-blind phase that lasts about 17 weeks. During the first 4 to 6 weeks, that's a screening period, and then it's followed by the actual treatment period, which is about 11 weeks. And then the second part of the study is called the open label phase, in which all patients will receive pitolisant. And so during the first 4 to 6 weeks, we consider this the screening visit. And this is where the study doctor will make sure that the patient fits all of the eligibility criteria. We'll do some lab blood work as far as that goes. And then they will be set up with something called an actigraph, which is right here. It's a wrist-like device. I always tell my patients that this looks like a glorified Fitbit, but it basically monitors body movement and in the form of sleep. So we'll be able to monitor your sleep behaviors based on your movements. So following the 2-week period of wearing the actigraph, at the next visit, which is the baseline visit, the patient will return back for routine labs again, but then they'll stay overnight for a sleep study, or otherwise known as a polysomnography, as well as a multiple sleep latency test, or an MSLT. So the PSG, or the sleep study, is completed in the sleep lab. It's where they will put sticky leads on your scalp, on your face, on your chest, on your arms, and there'll be a little cannula in your nose to monitor your breathing as well. And so basically we monitor your sleep to make sure that you don't have any other sleep disorders at that time. Following the sleep study, which occurs at night, you will wake up in the morning, and then the next morning you will undergo an MSLT, otherwise known as the multiple sleep latency test. This is a series of 5 naps divided in 2-hour breaks. And basically how quickly you fall asleep is what we're measuring. And so during each nap, you lie quietly and you try to go to sleep. We average the time, and that gives us the actual diagnosis on whether or not you do qualify for excessive daytime sleepiness or not. So after both studies are completed, the study doctor will then determine if you're eligible to participate in the rest of the study, and then the part of the dispensing of the study drug will happen. Both the PSG, or the sleep study, and the NAP study, or the MSLT, will happen at the baseline visit as well as at week 11, or visit 5. So in addition to the sleep study and the blood work, there are other things that we're going to be looking for. There will be, for females of childbearing age, we will do a pregnancy test. We will also be checking the urine to see if there's certain metabolites from certain medications that you've been taking. There will be a physical exam performed by a physician. There will be vital signs that includes height, weight, as well as blood pressure. There will be a electrocardiogram, which measures the electrical activity of the heart, so just to give us an idea of whether or not you have certain things like an arrhythmia. We definitely will do blood samples. And then the most important part of all of this is actually the caregiver's perspective. We'll be giving you a series of questions based on what you see, and we will also be asking the patient, depending on whether they're age appropriate or not, a 10-minute computer test as well. We will constantly ask you about any changes in your health and what other medications that you were taking or have stopped. And then most of the questions that we'll be asking will also be pertaining to the patient's behavior and sleepiness as well. So what else do you need to know as a caregiver? Well, there's a lot of visits. So sometimes, especially during coronavirus time, it might be difficult to attend some of these visits, especially if you need to travel. So we are aware of that, and you do have options depending on the site to remote from wherever you are to complete the parts of the study. So the questionnaires and the assessments are also done at the study clinic visit. We will need your help in completing a diary during the time that you're taking the medication, so that keeps them on track on the study drug dosing. We'll also need your help to make sure that in case there are issues or questions that the patient is experiencing, that you're able to inform us about that as well. We want to make sure that the study drug is administered properly each morning when the patient wakes up, and be able to return the unused medications with each study clinic visit. We want to ensure the collection of safety information, such as reporting illnesses or changes in medications by the pediatrician or family physician. So we will rely on you to give us that information. And then lastly, we'll need your help to schedule telephone calls in which we will call you to ask how things are going and to make sure that you don't have any additional questions during the trial period. So here are the participating sites. Currently, there's one location that is active, and that's Texas Children's Hospital here in Houston, Texas. The rest are still in the works of becoming active. So I want to refer you back to the clinicaltrials.gov website. Things are constantly being updated, and you can get further details on when they're activated and location and et cetera. So with locations and travel, it's very important to know about flight information, hotels, transportation. So we want to assure you that this is covered by the sponsor if you have to travel to your site. Again, we want to refer you to the clinicaltrials.gov website for more information, eligibility criteria, because we realize that this is a lot of information in a short period of time. And then the actual study number is listed there. So I want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate your efforts in helping the community with Prader Willi, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this with you.
There we go. Had to turn myself on mute or off mute. Thank you so much, Dr. Ravina, for that brief and very informative presentation. At this time, we are going to go into questions from the community. So I would just like to remind all of you that you are welcome to submit your questions into the question field of the GoToWebinar control panel. We have a couple questions that have already come in, so we'll go ahead and get started with some of those. So let's start with the question that everyone always asks, which is hyperphagia. It doesn't sound like that's an eligibility criteria. Do people need to have hyperphagia in order to participate? And is there any anticipation that this drug may benefit hyperphagia?
I mean, I can probably start and I let other people jump in, but what we know about Pitolisant is that this drug actually helps you keep awake and promote wakefulness. So that's why the primary endpoint of the study is focused on excessive daytime sleepiness. And that's how we assess, and the majority of the study, as you have already been explained, that will be around sleepiness and assessing excessive daytime sleepiness. There is a little bit of preclinical anecdotal evidence that Pitolisant might change some things related to hyperphagia. That's why we have the hyperphagia questionnaire. It's a secondary endpoint. We will be measuring it, but again, the drug does not, we don't expect this to be the major finding and the major thing that the drug does to you and your patient. And I'm sure Dr. Ravina may be able to add things to what I just said.
Yeah, in addition to that, you do not need to, that's not one of the qualifications or eligibility criteria either. So that's not something that you should not have to worry about if you do or do not have it. That does not matter or affect the eligibility criteria.
Great, thank you. There is a question in regards to measuring hyperphagia during the study, as it appears that will be a secondary endpoint. The specific question is, has the FSZQ already been validated, or will this study be used as a way to validate that questionnaire?
As of our current knowledge, we know that it's validated, and it's actually so this is not a study to validate that. This is something that if we do see a signal that supports hyperphagia, then this would open another avenue or door to another study that's separate from this. So it's just to see, but if there's a coincidence that hyperphagia is improved or does not improve with it.
Just to add on to that, it is one of the exploratory endpoints. So if we do see a signal, we would study that further in the phase 3 study.
Okay, Crystal, I don't know if it was just my audio, but I couldn't hear anything that you said.
I can probably repeat just because Crystal and I have been through that often enough. So again, hyperphagia is exploratory in our study. It's more of a whether we see a signal at all or not. And as I said, the expectation is for the drug to work on wakefulness and keep your child or you awake for a longer period throughout the day. And this is kind of where pitolisant had shown efficacy in previous studies. And that's how we got the approval for adult patients with narcolepsy for excessive daytime sleepiness. So this is where we hope the drug will make a difference in this patient population.
Great. And perhaps we need to back up a step because I'm getting a number of questions asking for us to clarify the difference between pitolisant and Provigil.
Well, they're different. They have different mechanism of action. Pitolisant acts through the histamine mechanism of action, and histamine is a major wake-promoting neurotransmitter or chemical in the brain. So when you get more histamine in your brain, you're more awake. And again, I'll defer to the sleep specialist. I can only speak about what the drug does. So the drug actually works through two different mechanisms, and they complement each other, but the end result is that at the end of the day, you have more histamine available in your brain. And I'll let Dr. Ivana take about the sleep consequences and how does that kind of work and how is it different from other medications.
Yeah, so it's totally different. So pitolisant acts on histamine, Provigil does not. It's a totally different receptor. There are side effects with the Provigil that are known. And we also know that it's not once a day dosing. It could be twice a day dosing versus pitolisant. Our study is including once a day dosing. There are also it has not been approved for younger kids, so it's used mainly off-label. So we're trying to not use the off-label use of pitolisant and trying to find the safety and efficacy in the younger kids as well.
All right. Number of questions coming in regarding the sleep test. Can patients bring in results from recent tests, or do they tests need to be taking place during the study with the study clinicians?
Okay, so unfortunately, the sleep study is one moment in time. And so you could get a sleep study 6 months ago. It may not be the same. You might not be in the same place again. And it has to be followed by the 2-week actigraph, which is the glorified Fitbit, followed by the very next day, the mean sleep latency test. And we do this so that we don't introduce other biases. And we want to ensure that there's no other sleep disorders. So a lot of times, if you had a previous sleep study, that's good information for us to know, because if it showed sleep apnea or if it showed some other sleep disorder, we want to ensure that that's adequately treated before in thinking about eligibility to the study.
And to add to that question, if someone has had a previous study, is it possible to have the site investigator review that study to just, I think what they're concerned about is that they might be ineligible. So rather than beginning the whole process, could someone review their existing results and say, yes, you look to be eligible, let's begin further screening you? Or could they just be removed right then and there, like, no, you're not eligible?
So that could be hit or miss. And I think that's one of the reasons why the study doctor is going to review the medical records. They're going to review medical history and whatnot, because it's one moment in time. It could be 6 months ago, and they had a lot happen. They had an illness, and that caused a lot of inflammation. And during the sleep study, it wasn't a reliable thing, or there wasn't enough sleep time. So we want to give every patient the benefit of the doubt that they don't have anything else that's going to interfere with the amount of sleepiness that they are measuring out to have. But I think it's very helpful to have that information up front. And so if you do have that handy, that's great. If not, we can work on getting those materials and for the physician to review.
Yeah, and again, the more information you bring to the site, I think that the easier we'll make it for Dr. Ivano or other investigators to assess actually whether you're a kid or whether you are an appropriate subject for the study. So I think the short answer is yes. If you have a previous study, bring it. It will help make the decision, but again, it won't let you skip the baseline assessment. And part of what we try to achieve is actually have the baseline and then the study assessment done at the same lab at the same time, so that you can really measure what the 11 weeks of treatment really did to your sleepiness. And that's why we are pretty strict about mandating the sleep study to be done before you start treatment with either pitolisant or a placebo or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. And now the eligibility questions are starting to come in. So specific to the test that they're testing during the daytime, in order to be eligible, does your child have to fall asleep during those daytime napping tests?
So that is a tricky question, but the whole point of the study is to measure how quickly you fall asleep. It's an average of 5 naps. So we see this all the time. You could have someone fall asleep in the first 3 naps and the other 2 naps, they don't fall asleep, but it averages so short that it's less than 8 minutes and they qualify. And so we also look for something called sleep onset REM periods. That is something where you'll hear about as the diagnosis for narcolepsy. Some folks will have it, some folks don't, but we're looking for the mean sleep latency to be less than 8 minutes. So it is not something to stress about if you don't sleep in all 5 naps. Not everyone does. It's mainly how quickly you fall asleep is what we're looking for.
Okay. Is there a list of drugs that would exclude someone from participating? A number of our loved ones are on a cocktail of various prescription drugs. Which ones immediately remove you from eligibility?
I mean, I can probably start, and Dr. Ivana, you feel free to jump in. We do have an approval for an adult patient with narcolepsy, and in the approved label, we do have some restrictions about drugs that are, for example, affecting 2D6 metabolism, which is again a liver enzyme that this drug pretty much gets rid of the drug when it's on board. So again, if you're a poor 2D6 metabolizer, you have more drug on board than a normal person. And because you have more drug on board, we don't want that to happen through the double-blind portion of the study. So therefore, we exclude all the medications that are strong inhibitors of that enzyme. And again, I think probably the safest way about going about your medication is to talk to your principal investigator, to the physician, and bring everything that you have. And again, we made the screening period long enough that if you are on a medication that is not allowed in the double-blind portion of the study, you can wash off this medication before you actually get into the sleep lab and get your baseline PHG. And Dr. Ivana, I mean, if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, other medication, I think they're looking for specifics. So things that come straight to mind are like the stimulant medications that you use for ADHD, the Provigil, the Nuvigil, things that keep you awake, as well as medications that could potentially alter your sleep architecture, such as antidepressants. That could also be something that we would have to look into as far as whether or not you need a washout period prior to starting the study.
So if potential participants want to review their list of prescription drugs that their loved ones are currently on, can they have a phone conversation with the clinician before coming in so they can be pre-screened in a way?
Sure. I think the other thing that could save some time as well is going to the clinicaltrials.gov, because the eligibility criteria is there too. But yeah, so everyone has some sort of research coordinator, someone that they actually will preview and review, and you'll be interacting with them and trying to coordinate everything. And so that could be one of the questions that could be reviewed. But I think what's really helpful is getting the big picture. So the physician reviewing everything, including all the past tests, sleep studies, and other examinations, other medications, is probably the better way to go. So I don't think we should skip out on the screening process, because you might miss out on an opportunity thinking, oh, you know what, this medication is actually going to prevent me from eligibility, when in fact we didn't think that at all, and we're not allowing you to participate, and that would be a big miss at that point.
And I mean, I probably will add one more thing, because I know that the wake promoting medications and stimulants many patients are on, we restrict them only for the double-blind portion of the study. So once you get past the double-blind portion of the study and you get to the open label extension, when everybody will be given Pitolisant, you may actually restart your other medications and kind of find the new balance of where all these wake promoting medications work for your kid or for yourself. So again, this is only for the 11 weeks double-blind portion. We are very strict there, but once we get past that portion, again, we try to be flexible and accommodate more medications that patients are on.
Great. Are there any interferences with allergy medications when using Pitolisant?
I can probably start with this one, because again, we have gotten a lot of questions about allergy medications. What we, again, it's almost like hitting the gas and the brake at the same time if you use the so-called first generation antihistamines, and those are the centrally acting antihistamines. Very few people use them for allergies, but yes, there are still some that are. So what we recommend is not to use them, or replace them with the second generation antihistamines. And in this case, the second generation antihistamines, they don't get to the brain, and then you're not doing the same thing, pretty much hitting the gas and the brake at the same time. And this is kind of the recommendation that we give to our patients about allergy medications.
Sure. Is there any eligibility or related to weight? Does your weight matter? Do you need to be obese, or is that irrelevant in this study?
No, so the eligibility criteria is not based on weight. We will be monitoring it. We will be taking your weight during the screening process, as well as at the visits, but that is not something that will make you eligible or not ineligible for the study.
All right. In your presentation, you showed a map of sites that this study will be offered at. They are not all currently open and enrolling. Is there a timeline or dates when we'll know which sites are going to be available?
I mean, I'll let Crystal start. If we cannot hear her, then I am happy to take over and do my best, because she's the one who is in charge of all of that. But Crystal?
Sure. Is my audio a little better now? Okay, very good. So I can say that we are working with all of the sites that you saw on the map for startup activities. So we are working to get everyone activated as soon as possible, so we can start enrolling your loved ones as soon as possible. I can't give exact timelines, but I do encourage you to check the clinicaltrials.gov listings frequently, as we'll be updating the status of sites same day as soon as they're active and ready to start recruiting.
Great. Quite a few people have participated in recent clinical trials, and they are perhaps now in the open label phase. Are they eligible to participate in this study?
I can probably take this one, and Amy, if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in. Currently, what we said is that we don't want you to be on another experimental drug while you're taking Pitolisant. So we do want you to, if you're in an open label of another study, you can temporarily stop the other medication throughout the double-blind portion of the study. And once we get to the open label, you can restart your other investigational drug. But again, kind of long story short, during the double-blind portion, we don't allow another medication. And after you're past this initial 11 weeks of treatment, then you can resume your other experimental drug and be on it.
Mhm. If a person has previously used pitolisant, can they participate in this study?
We did get questions like that, which is again good, because before that we never had the drug approved in the US, and now we already have patients who have been exposed, and we have thought about that, and where we landed is that we will treat pitolisant like every other wake promoting medication. So therefore you have to wash out from pitolisant, wait for the screening period to go to proceed, and then treat it as every other wake promoting medication.
All right. Back to the sites opening. Some sites are going to be opening sooner than others. If someone wants to get started right away with this study, and then a site opens up that is closer to them, are they able to switch to the closer site once it opens?
Yep, I'll take that.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. So for the double-blind portion of the study, we need all study participants to remain at the same location the entire time. And that goes back to Dr. Ravana's point of bias. We don't want one principal investigator determining certain aspects or features of the patient during the first part of the study, and then someone else doing it during the last visit, for example, because we may get some variability in there introduced that we don't want. So for the double-blind portion of the study, we need you and your loved one to be at the same site for the entire time. When it comes time for the open label, and it may be easier to go to a site that's closer to you, that would be fine.
All right, thank you so much. I'd like to thank the team from Harmony Biosciences, as well as Dr. Ravana for joining us today and answering questions from our community members. As we've said, if you're interested in learning more about this clinical trial or others, you will find a directory of clinical trials at fpwr.org, which includes contact information for each trial site. It also includes a link that will take you to their study on clinicaltrials.gov. You can reach out to the trial site nearest you to enroll. You can also ask any further questions you may have regarding participation to those clinicians. And once again, clinical trial information is always found at clinicaltrials.gov if you want to go into further details. Just as a reminder, I did mention a sleep survey that is available to you at the beginning of today's webinar. If you're interested in completing the sleep survey, I have placed a link for you in our chat box. You can click directly on that link and it will take you to the survey and more information. So thank you for joining us today. Please, community members, continue to spread the word about these trial opportunities so that we can enroll these studies as quickly as possible. Have a wonderful day, everyone. It was great to see you.
Yeah.